There are loves that heal and loves that destroy. But some go so far that they take more than a heart, they take a life. In 1971, the state of South Carolina witnessed one of the most haunting executions in its history, the quiet death of a man named Ethan Darnell. To the world, he was the cold-blooded murderer of a woman who adored him. But behind the walls of his prison cell, another story was waiting to be told. For 14 years, Ethan claimed his innocence. He never denied knowing her, Clara Wills, but he swore that he never touched her, never hurt her, and never loved her the way the world believed he did. And yet, love was the reason he died. What the cameras never showed, what the court refused to see, and what time tried to erase, was finally revealed in a single recording, his last confession, filmed just hours before the chair was switched on. Tonight, you will hear his final words. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand what kind of love could lead an innocent man to die in silence. Do you believe love can be powerful enough to destroy a life? Tell us in the comments what you think, because after hearing Ethan's story, you might never look at love the same way again.
My name is Ethan Darnell. I was born in 1908 in a quiet corner of Charleston, South Carolina. I've spent most of my life fixing clocks, watching the seconds go by for everyone but myself. Funny, isn't it? You spend your days repairing time, and in the end, time is the one thing you can't fix. They told me I have a few hours left, maybe less. I don't know exactly when the guards will come for me, but I can hear the sound of their boots echoing through the hall every now and then, and each time I wonder if it's for me. The room is cold tonight. The walls breathe. It's strange how a place meant for punishment can end up feeling like a kind of home. 14 years locked in this cell, and I've memorized every crack in these walls, every shadow that visits when the light flickers. They said I poisoned her. They said I was a monster who couldn't stand being rejected, but none of that is true. I never hurt Clara Wills. I never would. She was lost, sad, lonely. She came into my shop one day, holding an old pocket watch that belonged to her late husband. She said it had stopped ticking the day he died, and she wanted it to work again, so that time could move on. That's what she told me. But time never moved on for her. I used to listen to her talk. That was all. About books, about her garden, about the way the sea looked when the sun hit it just right. I thought I was doing her a kindness, being someone to talk to. But kindness, I learned, can be dangerous when it's mistaken for love. When she started showing up at my shop every day, I grew uneasy. She'd bring food, letters, gifts. Sometimes she'd just sit there for hours watching me work. I tried to be polite, to keep my distance. Then one day she told me she couldn't live without me. I told her she could. And that was the day everything started to end. A week later, she was gone. They found her with a cup of tea beside her bed and poison in her blood. The police said the fingerprints on the bottle were mine. They said the letters she wrote were proof that I had manipulated her, that I had broken her heart and driven her to death. But what they didn't know was that she had written one last letter, a letter that would have cleared my name. They never let the world see it. I've spent years in this cell thinking about her. Not in anger, not even in hate, but in confusion. How can love become something so cruel? How can a feeling meant to save end up destroying everything it touches? Sometimes I hear the sound of her voice in the dark, soft, trembling like when she used to read to me. Maybe it's just the wind sneaking through the cracks, or maybe it's her way of saying she's sorry. I don't know if anyone will ever see this recording. Maybe it'll be buried like the truth was. But if someone out there ever watches this, I want them to know one thing. I wasn't a saint. I made mistakes. But I did not kill Clara Wills. She died because she loved too much. And I died because I didn't love her back. I was born on a quiet spring morning in 1908 in Charleston. My mother used to say the church bells rang the moment I took my first breath. She liked to think it meant something, that maybe I came into the world already marked by time. My father, Samuel Darnell, was a watchmaker. Not a rich man, not even an ambitious one, just patient. The kind of man who believed that every gear, no matter how small, had its purpose. I learned everything from him, not just about clocks, but about silence. He wasn't a man of many words. He'd sit by the window for hours, working with a magnifying glass and trembling hands, and I'd sit beside him, watching. The tick of the watches became the sound of my childhood, steady, constant, like a heartbeat that never stopped. There was something comforting about that rhythm. Maybe that's why I became who I am. Someone who found peace in repetition, in things that didn't lie, in seconds that always kept their promise. When I was 12, my mother passed away. Pneumonia. The kind that comes fast and takes everything with it. My father never really spoke again after that. He worked, he ate, he slept. But something in him had stopped ticking too. I remember the day he showed me how to fix a broken spring. He said, "Every clock can be fixed, Ethan, except the one inside us." I didn't understand back then, but I do now. I left school early to help in the shop. We didn't have much, just a small room filled with ticking sounds and the smell of oil. But that place was my world. People came from nearby towns just to see my father work. He was known for repairing what everyone else called hopeless. When he died in 1935, I kept the shop running alone. I was 27. The world was changing. Radios, cars, war. But inside that little shop, time stayed still. I never married. Not because I didn't want to. I just never met anyone who could understand the kind of silence I lived in. Years later, when Clara walked into my shop for the first time, she said it smelled like her childhood. Like the past. I didn't realize how dangerous nostalgia could be until then. She looked at me like people look at something that reminds them of what they lost. And maybe, without knowing it, I became her way of holding on to time. I think about my father sometimes, about the quiet dignity he carried even in pain. I wonder what he'd say if he saw me now. Maybe he'd look at me and repeat that old line. Every clock can be fixed, except the one inside us. I suppose mine stopped working a long time ago, somewhere between the day Clara Wills walked into my shop and the day she never walked out of hers. When you've spent your life surrounded by ticking, you think you'll hear it forever. But in here, the silence is heavier. The only sound left is the one I can't stop hearing. Her voice echoing in my head, asking me why I didn't love her back. Before all of this, before the trial, the headlines, and the silence, my life was quiet, predictable, maybe too quiet. I woke up every morning at 6, opened my little shop on Meeting Street, and listened to the sound of the city waking up. Horses on cobblestone, vendors shouting, the faint hum of radios playing gospel songs through open windows. It was a rhythm I knew by heart. There was peace in the repetition. I liked the routine. It kept my mind still. Some people chase excitement, I chased stillness. I found beauty in small things. A clock ticking again after years of silence, a stranger smiling when I said, "It works now." Those moments were enough. Most of my customers were older folks, men and women clinging to the past through the things they couldn't let go of. An old watch, a wedding clock, a gift from someone long gone. They'd come in with trembling hands, as if the object itself still carried the person they'd lost. I think that's why I liked what I did. Fixing time felt like helping people remember, or maybe helping them forget for a while. I never expected my life to change. And then, one afternoon it did. It was the summer of 1955. The sun was brutal that day, pouring through the shop window like fire. I was bent over a broken mantel clock when the bell above the door rang, and she walked in. Clara Wills. She wasn't like my usual customers. Her voice trembled, but her posture was proud, like she was holding herself together with every ounce of strength she had left. She held a small velvet pouch, and when she opened it, I saw a gold pocket watch, cracked down the middle. "It belonged to my husband," she said. "It stopped ticking the day he died." Her eyes were glassy when she said that, not with tears, but with something heavier. I promised her I'd do my best to fix it. She smiled, and for a brief moment I thought that was the end of it. But she came back a week later, and then again, and again. Sometimes she brought other clocks, sometimes just excuses. She said she liked the sound of my workshop, that it made her feel calm. I didn't think much of it at first. People came and went. Grief makes you cling to anything that feels familiar. But after a while, I started noticing the details. The way she'd linger at the door, the way her eyes searched mine like she was waiting for something I wasn't saying. She'd bring me books, little gifts, letters she said she just felt like writing. I always thanked her politely. But politeness can be mistaken for invitation, and silence for hope. Looking back now, I think she was just trying to fill an emptiness I couldn't see. And maybe I was doing the same. We were two lonely souls trying to repair something broken. She just chose me, and I chose time. I remember the last time she came before everything fell apart. She said, "You've fixed everyone else's time, Ethan. When will you fix yours?" I smiled, but I didn't answer. I should have. I remember the day like a slow clock that wouldn't strike the hour. It was April 12, 1957. Clara had sent a note in the morning asking me to stop by after lunch. "The watch is running fast again," she wrote, with a little flourish under my name. I finished 2 repairs, wiped the bench, and walked to her house a little after 3:30. The air smelled of rain and magnolia. I told myself it was just another visit to adjust a balance wheel and be on my way. She opened the door too quickly, as if she'd been standing there for some time. Her hair was pinned the way she liked it when she wanted to look composed. On the table, 2 cups, a teapot, a plate with lemon slices. I told her I couldn't stay long. She said that was fine. 5 minutes, just 5. The pocket watch lay on a folded handkerchief. I set it down near the window where the light was best and opened the back. The spring had slipped, nothing serious. I tightened the screw, listened for the heartbeat, closed the case. I remember saying, "There, that's better." She stood very close while I checked the time against my own watch. Too close. I stepped back. She asked if I'd take tea for the road. I said no. She insisted. I said no again, softer. I could see the disappointment bloom and harden in her eyes. I thanked her, gathered my tools, and left at about 4:20. The street was quiet. I walked back to Meeting Street, unlocked my shop, and kept working. That is the last time I saw Clara Wills alive. Everything after that came like thunder. A neighbor said she saw me leave in a hurry. Another swore she heard voices later, men's voices, but changed her story twice before the trial. The police arrived at my door near midnight. They said Clara was dead, that she'd been found on her bed, a teacup on the nightstand, arsenic in her blood. On her kitchen shelf, behind a row of preserves, they discovered a small brown bottle with a handwritten label, arsenic powder. They held it like a trophy. My fingerprints were on the glass. I told them I had never touched that bottle. They told me prints don't lie. But prints can be moved. Prints can be lifted from a glass you did touch and pressed onto one you didn't. I didn't know those words then. I learned them later from a young attorney who believed me for a time, until the case swallowed him too. They said the letters Clara wrote, pages and pages, proved that I lured her, used her, then poisoned her when she became inconvenient. They read the worst lines aloud in court, looking at me as if I had written them myself. They never read the last letter, the one that should have been there and wasn't. There were details the jury never heard, or heard, and chose to forget. The teacup found beside her bed carried one set of prints, hers, and a faint ring of lipstick on the porcelain. Mine weren't on the cup or the kettle handle. The time of death. They placed it between 7 and 9 in the evening, based on stomach contents and the doctor's estimation. But I was seen downtown at 5, speaking to a supplier, and an old taxi driver swore he took me as far as East Bay just after 6. He wasn't called to testify. Unreliable, they said. His memory drifts. They made much of the bottle, how my prints were clear and deliberate. But the photo they showed in court revealed smudges across the shoulder, the kind that come from picking something up through cloth or from a transfer. And the label, my God, the label, was new. Perfect corners, bright ink. Whoever wrote arsenic on that paper hadn't stood in a humid southern kitchen for long. They said the poison could have been mixed in sugar and prepared earlier. Perhaps. But why were there 2 cups on the table when I arrived and only one beside her bed? Why did the police inventory include the lemon plate, but no spoon with residue? Why did a gardener employed by her father keep arsenic-based pest powder in a locked shed at the estate on Trad Street? And why did that fact never make it into the record? When they questioned me, I told them the same story I am telling you now. I told them I fixed the watch, refused the tea, and left. I told them that Clara had looked tired. Not fragile. She had been that for a long time. No, tired in the way people are when they decide something and no longer wish to be argued with. They asked if we argued. I said no. They asked if I loved her. I said no. I should have lied, perhaps. The truth sounded cruel. A man saying no to a grieving woman. They made it into a weapon. Later, I learned there was a letter. She had written it in her careful, slanted hand, the same hand that signed my repair slips. Someone found it after, not before. Someone took it. Someone hid it. I am not here to say his name. He is a man who feared scandal more than he feared God. They brought me into court in my best shirt. People sat forward when I walked by, as if guilt had a scent they could finally inhale. The prosecutor spoke about obsession and pride, and the thin line between a lover's devotion and a killer's rage. He looked at me as though he were reading a clock and had already decided the hour. I have replayed that afternoon in my head more times than there are ticks in a day. What did I touch? Where did I stand? Did my hand brush the shelf when I set down the handkerchief? Did I reach for the window latch? I cannot find the moment where my life became their story. You want to know if I am angry? I was, for a while. But anger runs fast, grief runs longer, and beneath both sits bewilderment. A quiet kind that hums like a mainspring wound too tight. I did not kill Clara Wills. I told her the truth. And the truth is a blade that cuts two throats. The one who says it, and the one who can't bear to hear it. If you're still watching, if my voice hasn't faded into the noise of your own life, hold on to this. The case against me was built on print and paper, on what was shown and what was hidden. Time may yet show the rest, and when it does, you will understand how a man can drown in a teacup, and how a single missing letter can weigh more than a verdict. They took me before sunrise. No cuffs at first, just hands behind my back, polite voices like they were asking a favor. But by the time I reached the station, the tone had changed. The politeness had become performance. Every man in uniform wanted to be the one who caught the Charleston poisoner. They locked me in a small cell that smelled of smoke and rust. I kept thinking it would pass, that the truth would surface, that someone would find the missing letter, that reason would return. But reason doesn't live long in a town hungry for scandal. For days they questioned me. Sometimes one man, sometimes three. They said I was lying. They said they had witnesses. They said Clara's death was my punishment for breaking her heart. I remember one of them slamming his fist on the table and shouting, "You killed her because she loved you." I told him, "No, I'm here because she did." He didn't like that answer. They kept me awake for almost 2 days straight, lights burning through my eyelids, voices circling my head. They wanted a confession, not the truth. But I held on. I thought if I just stayed calm, if I trusted the law, I'd walk out of there. When the trial began, the courthouse was full. People stood outside the windows just to see me walk in. Some held newspapers with my name printed in letters larger than the headlines about the war overseas. Watchmaker of death. The lover who killed. The judge never looked me in the eyes. The jury did, but not with curiosity, with certainty. The prosecutor's voice was smooth, rehearsed. He spoke about passion, betrayal, jealousy, things that have nothing to do with arsenic or fingerprints. He made poetry out of lies, and the jury drank it like gospel. My lawyer tried, God knows he did, but every time he spoke, the room went silent in the wrong way, not with respect, but with boredom. They didn't want logic, they wanted closure. They wanted a villain they could point to and say, "That's him, that's the man who killed love." When they brought out the evidence, it felt like watching a play where I already knew the ending. The bottle, the letters, the photographs, all carefully arranged, all poisoned with the same intention, to bury me quietly. The missing letter, the one that could have changed everything, was never mentioned. Later I learned that it had been found. Burned halfway, the edges blackened, as if someone wanted to destroy the truth but couldn't bring themselves to finish the job. When the verdict came, it was quiet. 12 men. 12 pairs of eyes. Not one of them met mine, guilty of murder in the first degree. My knees didn't give out, my voice didn't shake. I remember thinking, so this is how innocence sounds when no one believes it. They sentenced me to die by the electric chair. Some people cheered, some cried, and I just sat there, wondering if time had finally stopped ticking for me too. In the days that followed, letters came, not from friends, I didn't have many, but from strangers. Some said they believed me, others called me a monster, but one stood out. A small note, unsigned, written in a careful hand. The truth has a way of surviving, even when we don't. I've kept those words with me all these years. Because if they're right, if truth really does survive, then maybe when this recording ends, and the world forgets my name, somewhere, someone will still remember that Ethan Darnell was innocent. Family. It's a word that changes meaning when you live behind bars. At first, it means those who still visit. Then it becomes those who stopped coming. And after a while, it becomes nothing more than a memory. When I was arrested, I didn't have much family left. My parents had long been buried in the same cemetery by the river, the one where the oaks hang low and the air smells like salt. I had only one sister, Lucy, 5 years younger than me, the kind of woman who still wrote letters on fine paper and signed each one, with love. When the news broke, she came to see me. I'll never forget her face through the glass, calm on the surface, but her hands were shaking. She said, "Ethan, tell me it's not true." And I did. I told her everything, the clock, the tea, every detail, every second. She listened. She cried without making a sound, and then she said something I'll never forget. Even the truth sounds like a lie when the world has already decided who's guilty. After the trial, she came less and less. Not because she stopped believing me, but because belief has a price. Her neighbors whispered. The church turned its back. Her husband told her to let it go. And she did, not out of choice, but survival. The last time she visited me was in 1961. She brought a small box of cookies and a photograph of her children, my nephews, smiling on a porch under the summer sun. She said, "They don't know who you are. Maybe that's for the best." I didn't argue. I just told her to live, to let my story die if it meant peace for them. She kissed her fingers and pressed them against the glass. That was the last time I saw my sister. After that, silence filled the years. No letters, no visits, only the sound of footsteps passing by my cell, and sometimes stopping. I used to imagine what people said about me out there. The shop boarded up, the clocks covered in dust, the windows clouded over. Someone must have walked by and said, "That's where the murderer used to work." And maybe a child asked, "What did he do?" And maybe no one answered. In a way, I'm grateful for that. I wouldn't want anyone, not Lucy, not her children, not even strangers, to carry my name like a wound. Let them forget me. Because sometimes forgetting is the only kind of mercy left. But I never forgot them. There were nights when I lay awake, listening to the hum of the prison lights, thinking of home, the smell of morning coffee, the creak of the old floorboards, the sound of my sister laughing in the kitchen when we were children. That's the cruelest part of prison. It doesn't just take your freedom. It takes your witnesses, the people who could tell the world who you really were. And when they're gone, you begin to fade too, piece by piece, until you're just a shadow in a story no one believes anymore. Sometimes I wonder if Lucy ever told her children about me after I was gone. Maybe one day they'll find this recording, or my name in some forgotten newspaper and ask, "Who was he?" And maybe she'll say, "He was my brother, and he was innocent." If those are the last words ever spoken about me, that's enough. 14 years. That's how long I've been here. 14 years listening to the same keys, the same footsteps, the same voices calling out numbers instead of names. The first year I thought I'd go mad. Every sound echoed, the clang of the bars, the cough of another man, the rattle of the food tray sliding across the floor. I could smell fear in the air, thick as rust. Some prayed, others cursed. Some laughed like ghosts. I learned quickly that in here, laughter isn't joy. It's surrender. They put me in Block C, 2 cells away from the execution room. You could hear everything when they brought someone in. The boots, the prayers, the silence afterward. That silence was the worst part. It wasn't quiet. It was heavy, like the air forgot how to move. I've seen men break. I've seen strong ones lose their minds before the chair ever touched them. Some went out screaming, others humming hymns. Each time the lights flickered for a second, and I'd close my eyes and whisper, "Another innocent man gone." Because in here, innocence means nothing. Every man claims it. Few believe it. And the guards, they just laugh. The guards changed over the years, but cruelty never did. There was Henderson, the first one, liked to jingle his keys just to remind you they were his. He'd stop by my cell at night, tapping the bars with his baton, whispering, "You still waiting for God, Darnell? He ain't coming." Then there was Reeves, younger, quieter, but meaner in silence. He'd switch the lights off when I was reading. Once, he tore up one of Lucy's letters before I could touch it. We fought that night. He hit me once, I hit him back. They dragged me out, chained my wrists, and left me in solitary for a week. No window, no sound but my own breathing. That's where I learned how loud guilt can be, even when it isn't yours. I tried to keep to myself, but the others, they saw something in me. Maybe calm, maybe weakness. Men here test you in strange ways. A stolen blanket, a taunt through the bars, a piece of bread thrown in your plate. One night, 2 inmates started fighting across the hall. It turned into a riot before dawn. Blood on the floor, guards screaming, dogs barking. When it was over, 1 man was gone. I never asked who. I never wanted to know. There were friendships too. Brief, fragile things that never lasted. There was Marcus, who swore he was innocent, like me. We talked through the wall for months. About food, about women, about the smell of rain. Then one day, they came for him. The next morning his cell was empty. They cleaned it before breakfast, but the smell of burnt leather stayed for days. After that, I stopped making friends. You can't hold on to what the world is determined to erase. Years turned into habits. Habits turned into silence. I stopped counting the days when I realized the calendar didn't move for men like me. Every sunrise was the same shade of gray. Sometimes I'd think about Clara. Not in anger. Not even in sadness. Just wonder. What kind of love leads 2 people to this place, one buried in a cold grave, the other waiting for a chair that hums with electricity? The world outside moved on. Presidents changed. Wars ended. Men walked on the moon. And I stayed here, in a cell that smelled of rust and memory. My hands trembled more each year, not from age but from time. From the weight of all the seconds I could never fix. And yet, somehow even here, life refused to die completely. I saw it in the small things. The flicker of a candle during a power cut. A rat stealing bread from the guard's desk. A bird that once perched on the window bars at dawn. For a moment, it felt like forgiveness. But forgiveness is a dangerous thing in a place built on punishment. The last time I spoke of hope, a man laughed and said, "Hope don't live here, old man." Maybe he was right. Maybe all that lives here now are ghosts, and I'm just one of them, still breathing. There are things time can't heal, and injustice is one of them. It doesn't scream. It doesn't knock. It slips in quietly, settles inside you, and starts to eat away at everything. Your faith, your hope, your sense of who you are. In the first years, I still believed someone out there was trying to help me. That maybe a new lawyer would show up, that a forgotten document would surface, that someone, anyone, would care enough to look past the headlines. But the world gets used to the silence of the innocent. Justice, in here, has another name. It's called survival. You survive the cold, the hunger, the insults, the stares that say, "You deserve this." You survive the guard's laughter, the judge's arrogance, the hollow prayers of those pretending to care. But what hurts the most isn't what they do to you. It's what they make you believe about yourself. There were nights I started to doubt my own memory. I'd relive the day of the crime over and over again. I'd think, what if I touched something I shouldn't have? What if I left a trace without knowing? That's what injustice does. It bends the truth until even the innocent start to wonder if they're guilty. Here, time becomes punishment. Every second drips like water into a bucket that never fills. And each drop sounds like a question, with no answer. Why me? I've seen men confess to crimes they never committed, just to end the waiting. I've seen innocent men go mad while hoping for one last chance. And I've seen guilty ones cry with more truth than the judges who condemned them. I've learned that guilt and innocence don't live on opposite sides. They live mixed together, like dust and blood on the cold floor of a cell. Sometimes the worst punishment isn't dying. It's living too long knowing the world got it wrong. One day the warden called me in. He said, "Darnell, you should accept your fate. Every man pays for something." And I told him, "Yes, sir, but some of us pay for someone else's sin." He never called me in again. Injustice has its own sound. It's not the noise of the courtroom. It's not the buzz of the electric chair being tested. It's the slow, tired rhythm of a heart that's given up on being forgiven. Years later, when they installed cameras in the cells, one of the younger guards asked me, "If you could say something to the world, what would it be?" And I said, that there's no prison worse than being forgotten. He didn't understand. None of them do. The world doesn't want the truth. It wants blood. It wants endings, not stories. It wants guilt, not questions. But I keep talking, even if no one's listening. Because injustice only wins when silence becomes normal. After all these years, it's not death that scares me anymore. It's knowing that time, the same time I spent my life trying to fix, will never give back what it took. The chance to be heard while still alive. Today, they told me it's time. Funny how a man can wait 14 years for this day and still not be ready when it comes. The sun barely touched the window this morning. They opened the door earlier than usual, and I could hear the guards whispering like children who'd seen a ghost. I guess that ghost is me. I shaved. They gave me a clean uniform, blue pressed, still smelling of soap. For a moment I looked at myself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked calm. Too calm for someone counting down the hours. But that's what time does to a man like me. It doesn't kill you all at once. It kills you quietly, one sunrise at a time. The priest came by after breakfast. He spoke of forgiveness, of peace, of heaven. I nodded. But the truth is, I stopped asking God why a long time ago. Maybe heaven doesn't want answers. Maybe it just wants silence. They say a man's last day feels slower, but that's not true. It moves like lightning. Every sound, every breath sharper, louder, clearer. The rattle of the keys, the smell of coffee from the guard's room, the sound of the chapel bell echoing somewhere down the hall. Even my heartbeat feels like it's trying to remember it all. There's something strange about dying innocent. You don't fear the chair. You fear being forgotten. You fear the story ending before the truth is ever told. I thought of Lucy today. Wondered if she still lives in that same white house with the cracked porch steps. If she ever forgave herself for letting go. I hope she did. Because none of this was her fault. Sometimes I wonder how Clara would have felt if she knew I was the one to pay for her death. Would she have cried for me? Would she have prayed? I don't know. All I know is, I forgave her a long time ago. I had to. If I didn't, I wouldn't have survived the years. After lunch, they let me walk in the yard for a while. The air was warm, the sky was pale, and for the first time in years, I felt the wind touch my face without bars between us. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like farewell. The guard, a new one, nervous, asked if I wanted anything before the night. I said no. I've had enough of wanting. It's strange, you know, how a man can spend his life fixing clocks, measuring every second, and still run out of time before the truth catches up. Tonight they'll come for me. They'll tie the straps. They'll place the hood, and the world will keep turning, faster than ever, as if I was never here. But I hope someone out there will listen to this tape and see me for what I was. Not a monster, not a murderer, but a man who loved, lost, and paid for someone else's sin. If there's justice beyond these walls, maybe it waits for me on the other side. And if there isn't, then at least I'll leave knowing the truth didn't die with me. Night came without warning, no sunset, no colors. Just the slow fading of gray until the lamps in the corridor took the place of daylight, like workers stepping into a shift nobody wants. The young guard, the nervous one, counted louder than usual. Maybe he's afraid of silence. I used to be too. They brought what they call the final meal. Strange name. Nothing about endings has a taste. It came warm. Bread, a cup of milk. I asked for just one thing, an apple. When I bit into it, the sound was clean, almost pure. It reminded me of the orchard behind my sister Lucy's house, of the time she laughed when I stole the ripest fruit before it was ready. If she ever sees this recording, she'll understand why I chose the apple. The chaplain stopped by again. He sat quietly on the metal bench, speaking softly, like a man afraid to wake the dead. He asked if I wanted to confess anything else. I told him I already had, my fears, my loneliness, my small mistakes. But not a crime I didn't commit. He nodded, though I saw in his eyes that he wished I'd lie. Not out of cruelty, but because sometimes a lie gives peace to those who need to close the book. There was noise down the corridor, 2 inmates arguing over a blanket. Reeves stormed in, baton in hand, barking orders as if discipline could save anyone tonight. Someone shouted, someone laughed. I heard my name, the clockmaker, followed by short laughter. Not mockery, not really. Just the sound of men trying to pretend they're still alive. When it ended, the quiet returned heavier than before. I washed my face, ran water through my hair. The prison camera blinked its red light, steady, watching. I thought of how many lives can fit on a tape. A boy in his father's workshop, a man fixing clocks, a prisoner, a ghost still waiting to be believed. I opened the small notebook I'd kept hidden for years. Inside were pieces of me, half memories, half confessions. The smell of hotel soap in Clara's house, the lipstick mark on her cup, the label on a bottle too new for the dust around it, her handwriting, firm, tilted, on the letter that vanished. I wrote one last line for Lucy. If your heart still carries the weight, leave it at the church when dawn comes. God knows how to tell memory from guilt. Around 10, they brought papers to sign. They wrote over my name. I signed beneath my fate. They asked what should be done with my belongings. The notebook, a broken pocket watch. Ironic, the one that belonged to Clara's husband. 3 folded letters and a faded photograph of my parents. I asked them to keep it all with this recording. Maybe together, those things tell the truth I never could. The young guard returned with a jacket, said it was getting cold near the chamber. I thanked him. He tried to speak. I saw the sentence fighting in his throat. In the end, all he said was, "I'm sorry." He stood there holding the keys like a child, gripping something he doesn't understand. If he ever has a son, I hope he teaches him that justice without patience becomes cruelty. They let me sit in the chapel, empty, silent. I didn't ask for miracles. Just one thing. That Lucy sleeps peacefully tonight. That Clara's name is remembered kindly. That truth finds a path once I'm gone. In the stained glass, a saint carried a small lamp. The light fell across the floor, a circle of gold. I stepped into it and stood still, as if time itself gave me a final center. Back in my cell, I found the brown envelope they left for me. My statement for the recording. I read it again, crossed out 2 lines, replaced maybe with I saw, and I think with I remember. Doubt is rust. It eats truth from the inside. Better a flawed memory than a perfect lie. I hear footsteps. The corridor clock, irony till the end, stopped weeks ago. No one bothered to fix it. I smiled. Here, time doesn't move anymore. Only I do. Through words. Soon they'll ask me to remove the invisible rings. Fear, shame, what's left of hope. They'll tighten the straps across my chest, arms and legs. They'll adjust the band on my forehead. Someone will read the time aloud, and before the world blinks I'll be gone, reduced to a phrase, an image, a file stored somewhere by someone who might, just might, believe. I want to meet that moment whole. Not to prove anything to them, but to honor those who loved me without conditions, my parents, Lucy, and the strangers who once wrote, "I believe you." If you're watching this, hold your breath with me for a second. This silence, right here, isn't surrender. It's preparation. It's the fold of a letter before it's delivered. It's the hand on the doorknob before the door opens. When they seat me, I'll look straight into the lens, like greeting an old friend. I'll speak what I've held all these years, clear, simple, whole. I'll name names, mark hours, reveal what everyone ignored. And when I finish, I won't ask for mercy. I'll ask only that you listen, because truth doesn't always save us, but it gives us back our face. Now, I close the notebook. I breathe once more. I hear the click of the key, and I feel, not the end, but the curve of the road. I'm ready to say what must be said. 14 years. 14 years waiting for one simple thing, to say what happened without being spoken over. No lawyers, no headlines, just me and this camera. They said I murdered Clara Wills. They said I poisoned a lonely woman because I wanted control. But Clara was not someone else's wife. She was a widow, a woman whose time stopped the day her husband died, the day that pocket watch froze. I did not kill her. On April 12, 1957, I visited her house to repair the old watch again. I left around 4:20 in the afternoon. 2 cups sat on the table then, but I didn't drink the tea. I told them that from the first day. The teacup by her bed later carried only her prints and a faint ring of lipstick. They never cared. They found arsenic in her blood and a brown bottle on a kitchen shelf behind preserves. A bottle with my fingerprints. I told them I'd never touched it. Prints can be lifted, moved, pressed. I didn't know those words at the time. I learned them here. What no one wanted to hear is this. Clara was drowning long before I ever said no. Grief had turned into dependence. Loneliness had turned into a room with no doors. I listened to her. I fixed her watch. I kept a kind distance. She mistook distance for cruelty. I mistook kindness for safety. There was another source of arsenic near her life, the pest powder used at her father's property on Trad Street. The gardener kept it under lock. People in Charleston knew. The court did not want to. Arsenic was not a mystery in that house. It was a tool. They told a story in the courtroom about a jealous clockmaker, but they never told hers, that a proud, grieving daughter in a God-fearing city could not bear the word suicide stitched to her family's name, that she had spoken of ending the ache in words I did not understand then, that she once said while I adjusted the balance wheel, "If time won't move, maybe I should." I thought it was poetry. It was a plan. There was a letter. I am certain of it. Written in her tilted, careful hand, the same hand that signed my repair slips. She wrote it after I left, not to blame me, but to free me, that I had refused the tea, that I had been kind, that the decision was her own. Someone found that letter first. Someone who feared scandal more than they feared God. Someone who thought a quiet lie could protect the living better than a loud truth could honor the dead. They half burned it. I've dreamed the blackened edges for years. You may ask how I can know this. I know because of the pattern. The single cup at the end, the missing spoon, the new label on an old bottle, the smudged shoulder where cloth pressed glass, the locked shed where arsenic sat in plain sight. The time of death placed hours after I walked home along Meeting Street. And I know because Clara's last months were full of sentences that sounded like farewells wearing nice dresses. I do not hate her. How could I? She died because grief told her there was no gentler way to stop the noise. And I am dying because I told the truth, when truth sounded like cruelty. I did not love her back. To the man who hid that letter, I will not speak your name. You were trying to save a reputation. You buried a man instead. One day you will hear a clock in an empty room. The sound will be steady, patient, merciless. It will say what I am saying now. If Lucy sees this, don't carry what isn't yours. Leave it at the church doors at dawn. Let God sort memory from guilt. And Clara, wherever your silence rests, I forgive you. Not for choosing the end, but for believing you had no other choice. My name is Ethan Darnell. I was innocent. I always was. And those were my last words.
Ethan Darnell was executed on the night of September 3, 1971, inside the death row block of the Charleston Penitentiary. Hours before his execution, he recorded the tape you just heard. alone, under the dim light of his cell, speaking to a camera that barely worked. That tape remained forgotten for nearly half a century. In 2019, during the renovation of the old prison's administrative wing, a worker found a rusted iron box hidden behind a false wall. Inside it were an old pocket watch, a few faded photographs, and a sheet of paper burned around the edges. The handwriting was tilted and precise. At the bottom, still legible despite the stains, was a signature. Clara Wills. The letter read, "Mr. Darnell refused the tea. He was kind. The choice was mine." It was dated the same day as her death, written only hours after the coroner's estimated time. But that letter never reached the police, nor the court. Someone had found it first, someone who feared shame more than justice, a person terrified of what people might say about a widow who had chosen to end her own pain. That person burned part of the letter and hid the rest inside a small prayer book, believing that silence could protect the memory of the dead, even if it destroyed the living. Decades later, forensic experts confirmed the authenticity of the handwriting, the ink, and the paper. It was real. It was the letter that could have saved Ethan Darnell's life, but the truth came too late, much too late. Today, the clock Ethan repaired for Clara is displayed at the small courthouse museum in Charleston. It still works. It still keeps perfect time. And beneath the glass, a small plaque reads, "Time didn't absolve him, but the truth did." Ethan died without seeing his name cleared. But the tape he left behind, that fragile confession recorded in the final hours of his life, became what he always wanted it to be: heard. Because sometimes the truth doesn't save a life. It only saves what's left of it. In memory of Ethan Darnell, 1903-1971, a man the world heard too late.